Bene, buonasera, buonasera a tutti e a tutte. Apriamo la seduta di presentazione e discussione della tesi di diploma di licenza di secondo livello dell'allieva e studentessa dell'Università di Catania, Maria Carla Merlo. La dottoressa Merlo, perché questa è una tesi di diploma che, come ben sapete, ha l'equivalenza con un titolo di master di secondo livello. Si è laureata nell'Università di Catania, corso di studi in storia e cultura dei paesi mediterranei, con una carriera brillante. È stata seguita dalla professoressa Panebianco e vengo a presentare la commissione di questa sera, composta dalla relatrice, la professoressa Stefania Panebianco, Università di Catania, Dipartimento di Scienze Politiche e Sociali, e la nostra controrelatrice e ospite di questa sera, che ringraziamo molto per la sua presenza qui con noi in presenza. Non è scontato nella stagione post-Covid, quindi siamo particolarmente onorati e onorate di averla con noi, la professoressa Cavallaro, Maria Elena Cavallaro, Storia delle relazioni internazionali, Università Luis Guido Carli di Roma. La dottoressa Merlo presenta una tesi di stringente attualità dal titolo The Rule of Law Crisis in the EU, The Impact of Budgetary Conditionalities on Black Siting Member. Daremo subito la parola alla professoressa Panebianco per la presentazione, seguirà l'intervento della candidata ed infine daremo la parola alla controrelatrice, la professoressa Cavallaro. Prego.
Sì, lei è presente l'inglese? Lei è presente l'inglese? Quindi, vabbè. Ok. È un piacere per me. Intanto buonasera, grazie alla professoressa Di Stefano per avere organizzato questa commissione di laurea, questa seduta in un orario poco canonico. Effettivamente sono tanti gli impegni istituzionali che talvolta non ci permettono di lavorare in orari più tradizionali e consoni. Ringrazio la professoressa Maria Elena Cavallaro per aver accettato di fare da controrelatore di questa tesi, perché alla LUIS già c'erano state delle interlocuzioni che avevamo avuto quando Maria Carla aveva seguito il master in studi europei alla LUIS, appunto, ed è stata anche in quella circostanza allieva mia, nonché allieva della professoressa Cavallaro. Io sono molto contenta del lavoro che Maria Carla ha svolto, questa tesi di diploma interessante per il tema che tratta, di grande attualità, e per il modo in cui Maria Carla lo ha trattato, denotando peraltro le caratteristiche di Maria Carla, la sua capacità di andare oltre la lettura del testo, la lettura critica e, se vogliamo, anche creativa, che io ho sempre apprezzato nella sua carriera del secondo livello, che ho avuto modo di seguire appunto come supervisor quando è stata studentessa del corso di storia e cultura dei paesi del Mediterraneo presso il Dipartimento di Scienze Politiche e Sociali. Di cosa si occupa questa tesi? Dicevamo, la tesi è molto rilevante perché in questa epoca ci stiamo chiedendo a che serve l'Unione Europea, che vuol dire fare parte dell'Unione Europea, quali devono essere le caratteristiche degli Stati membri che fanno parte dell'Unione Europea e se è possibile a un certo punto, dopo avere superato il vaglio dei criteri di Copenaghen, dopo aver rispettato tutti i criteri di Copenaghen, è possibile in qualche maniera uscire da questi canoni, dei canoni ai quali siamo abituati, di un sistema democratico consolidato, la garanzia di libertà individuali i criteri di Copenaghen continuano ad essere attuali? Un po' sono queste le domande che la scienza politica si sta facendo, e nel momento in cui si osservano due casi in particolare, la Polonia e l'Ungheria, che sono i casi studio dei quali lei si è occupata. La Polonia per lungo tempo stata un osservato speciale, ma nel momento in cui è cambiata la dirigenza, sono cambiate le idee della leadership polacca, in questo momento il presidente polacco è il presidente Donald Tusk, che fu a sua volta presidente del Consiglio europeo. Rimane il secondo osservato speciale, rimane l'Ungheria di Orban, che si caratterizza molto spesso per tratti liberali al suo interno, ma anche per una violenza e una tendenza a non rispettare alcune norme comunitarie. Mi viene in mente la protesta della quale ormai non si parla più, la protesta che fecero i cosiddetti paesi di Visegrad rispetto alle cosiddette quote di migranti che, secondo la Commissione europea, la proposta della Commissione europea poi accolta dal Consiglio dell'Unione Europea, alcuni migranti andavano redistribuiti sul territorio europeo, peraltro in piccoli numeri, e alcuni paesi, questi paesi di Visegrad, in particolare dicevamo Ungheria e Polonia, si sono opposti. Si sono opposti, non hanno rispettato una norma, una decisione che era stata presa a livello comunitario. Il taglio e l'analisi empirica che, Maria Carla poi ha, voluto dare al suo lavoro si è incentrata su un aspetto molto specifico, quello della, condizionalità rispetto alla erogazione o meno di, bilancio, il modo in cui questa è stata condotta, bloccata o erogata nella fase successiva alla, pandemia. Ci troviamo in un momento in cui, l'Unione Europea è stata molto generosa, si è posta, come un, accompagnatore. Noi italiani ne abbiamo avuto grande vantaggio nel momento in cui l'Unione Europea ci ha aiutato anche con importanti fondi legati al Next Generation EU. Ci si chiede in che misura l'Unione Europea debba e possa utilizzare la condizionalità rispetto ad un, blocco, o meno dell'erogazione di questi fondi. Questo è un po' il quadro generale nel quale l'analisi empirica, poi la ricerca che Maria Carla ha condotto e che ora ci esporrà, si inserisce e si inquadra. Va detto che la tesi che lei illustrerà in inglese è stata scritta in inglese e ha raccolto una quantità, cospicua di letture. La letteratura è stata presa in esame in maniera minuziosa e attenta, e questo gli ha permesso di elaborare anche in maniera creativa uno strumento che a me è piaciuto moltissimo, il Rule of Law Toolbox. E quindi vorrei che ce lo spiegasse in che cosa consiste questo toolbox dello Stato di diritto. Vorrei che ci dicesse appunto oggi pomeriggio quali sono gli aspetti più, innovativi della ricerca che ha condotto, e vorrei capire se magari poi si può proporre, immaginare un momento, uno spazio di approfondimento successivo per ulteriori ricerche, per ulteriori studi. Prego Maria Carla.
Thank you very much, Professor Panebianco, Professor Di Stefano, and for having introduced my thesis. As was already said, I will speak in English since the thesis was written and presented in English. So as Professor Panebianco already mentioned, my thesis will focus on the rule of law crisis, this so-called rule of law crisis that's emerged as the most recent instance of a series of crises plaguing the EU since the 2008 financial and economic crisis. The main focus of my research was on the adoption of economic and budgetary conditionality measures as the most recent strategy adopted by the EU to try to improve and overcome the limits of the already existing instruments, which were essentially judiciary relied essentially on judiciary and legal basis. First of all, I would like to
sketch the main ideological and theoretical tenets of the most the actors that are responsible for the phenomena addressed by the youth, let's say populist movements and populist parties, which emerged as important actors at the youth level, conditioning, determining instances of rule of law, crisis, and backsliding. And as I will explain, the ideology and the particular ideological structure of these parties and movements has an impact on their policies while entering the government. So first of all, of course, the emergence of populist movements is not related, is not limited to Central and Eastern Europe, although the most important instances at the moment are Hungary and Poland. They are, of course, a phenomenon spread throughout the all Western advanced democracies, which have as its origin in the decline of mainstream parties as a consequence of the broader social, cultural, and economic transformations of contemporary societies. Currently, the theory on populism is quite scattered and lacks, as said by several scholars, lacks a comprehensive theoretical elaboration and univocal elaboration. The most important, one of the most influential definitions was provided by Mude, which limits, avoids succeeding in avoiding conceptual stretching, presents the populist movements essentially as a thin ideological, as based on a thin ideology, which is complemented by a host ideology, which can be either from the right or from the left, or from other ideological categories. And gives helps to fill this very thin ideological structure that characterizes populist movements, which is based essentially on the a moralistic opposition between the pure people and the corrupt elites, and a unitary conception of the people, and a refuse of essentially of constitutional checks and balances in the name of the general will of the people, which is embodied in unmediated ways by the ruling leaders, which essentially embodies the people, like in Laclau's terms. Although there are several varieties of populism, and the classification of populist movements is increasing over time, also because of the geographical, while the geographical analysis spreads, the essential characteristics of populism are the reference to the general will and a refuse of constitutional checks and balances, which proves particularly problematic while populist movements enter in governments and are confronted with the institutional structures of liberal democracy, of the liberal democratic model. There are literature oscillates between an account of populism as a corrective or as a threat to the democratic nature, or to democracy capable of either strengthening the democratic nature of the youth, if we consider it as a tool to overcome the limits posed on a general on the will of the people, and to overcome the limits of representative structures, or to suggest creative solutions to improve the accountability and responsiveness of liberal institutions, or as a threat, since it entails a marginalization, the risk of a marginalization of all these categories, either nationalist or ethnical or social, that do not respond to the idea of the people sponsored by populist movements. Okay. I will. There are a lot of things to say about the problematic relationship between populism and constitutional democracy, which is also reflected at the supranational level in the EU. Internal problematic account of non-majoritarian and unelected institutions, which are typical of the structure of the European Union. But I would skip to the main phenomena that the EU is currently facing and addressing through its rule of law toolbox, which are the emergence of illiberalism and autocratizations. And the emergence of democratic backsliding. These phenomena are, of course, diffused at a global level, but they're increasing. They increased in the last decades. The first authors pointing to these phenomena were perplexed by its diffusion also to apparently consolidated democracies and democracies introduced with in being part of the European Union, which should represent a guarantee against against possible backsliding. Illiberalism challenging the narrative of an endless consolidation of Western liberal democracies, even at the heart of where the liberal democratic model was born and spread. That's to say Europe. It is conceptualized by scholars like Bermeo or first of all Zacharias as a state-led debilitation or the elimination of many of the political institutions that sustain an existing democracy through a systematic action led by the governing majority and the governing parties, which results in the establishment of hybrid regimes or electoral democracies, mainly among the several forms of governments, and follows a recurring patterns that often goes undetected if an improper elaboration. If there's lacking a proper elaboration of these phenomena, for example, so usually these events happen under a legal facade. Usually there's a democratically elected government that gradually erode the constitutional checks and balances while preserving the liberal democratic guarantees and norms and maintaining intact the democratic procedural dimension. This is, of course, a challenge for also for the European Union to, in order to assess, first of all, whether there is an actual democratic backsliding phenomenon ongoing, or and which kinds of and in which frame assess the ongoing events. Several authors pointed out, for example, that the checklists, the rule of law checklists introduced by the European Union in order to evaluate the level of respect for rule of law standards and democracies are often focus on specific legal dimension or specific violations. For example, it's the case of the rule of law infringements of the infringement procedures. And fail to grasp the broader evolution of the phenomenon and the diachronic evolution of backsliding phenomena. it's, for example, was Shepard essays affirming, advocating for a broader understanding of the different parts that constitute and interact within a constitution, and the effect that that single reforms, political reforms, can have combined together. So these kinds of patterns can be observed, have been observed, especially in Hungary and Poland. The main disease, they are the actual at the moment they are the most concerning, the most worrying cases. Although Poland in 2023, in the election of 2023, changed its government, which passed to the opposition party Civic Platform, which obtained the majority, and authors are also in the constitutional theory or legal studies are questioning what could be possible actions, for example, to revert to the previous the state precedents, to the constitutional reform, to the reforms that led to backsliding, for example, to how to restore the rule of law. But it's, of course, it's an ongoing process. So at the moment, the only country that falls within the category of electoral democracy, which has been classified as electoral democracy, is Hungary, and it's, of course, the only instance within the EU. And both the two countries underwent their backsliding process under governments led by parties that could classify because of their ideology within the populist category, respectively Fidesz party in Hungary and Law and Justice PAS party in Poland. They all underwent a transformation in their ideological basis, passing from mainstream liberal parties to populist, accentuated ethno-nationalist characteristics. Both of them have a strong emphasis on the general will of the people, which led them on a short succession to try to capture the non-majoritarian institutions in the name of the general will of the people. Through a series of transformations and reforms, aiming to capture, for example, among the most prominent ones, the judiciary. The first, the particular. The judiciary, trying, for example, one of the most well-known reform, which was addressed by the European Union with an infringement procedure, is the lowering of the overall retirement age of judges in Hungary, and from 70 to 62 years. But Hungary, of course, there were a series of lots of many other laws, many other reforms. For example, the one that Professor Panivenko was mentioning before, against trying to exploit the issue of refugees and migration and the migration crisis, to hollow out the importance of civil society organization and NGOs. So, for example, it's the case of the law of on transparency of foreign funded NGOs, or the Stop Soros package, introducing the crime of facilitating illegal migration, or it's also the case of a referendum, proposed by the Hungarian government, even in the absence of the considered valid, for example, even in the absence of the legal majority, the legal quorum, Of course, this particular the ability of the governing majority to propose this kind of violation of rule of the reforms that are labeled as that are classified at the EU level as rule of law violations is due to the combined effect of some structural factors. That is to say, they constitute an electoral law that favors was intended to favor in the post communist era, favor smaller parties to avoid a deadlock and to enable the formation of majority government majorities, and the absence of strong checks on the national constitution. And in Poland followed shortly following explicitly referring to the model of Hungary, which also referred in the words of Orban himself to the will to create an illiberal democracy. So as we can say, as we can see in Poland, Poland enacted similar reforms. In particular, the most stunning case was the constitutional crisis with deadlock in the functioning of the Constitutional Tribunal, which happens according to the model of autocratic legalism and illiberal democracies, without formally removing the Constitutional Tribunal or other unelected institutions, as happened, for example, as happened also in the case of Hungary. The rule of law, these violations were addressed by the EU along the time. It wasn't the definition of a crisis. The acknowledgement of the existence of a crisis didn't emerge in a short time, but was actually the process of a broader long-term framing process, which of course it was particularly relevant, was considered as a vital problem, since it did not affect only did not concern only the member states in question, but affected also the correct functioning of the of the single market and the principle of mutual trust between member states, impacting also the potential leverage on in foreign relations of the European Union, which presents itself as a normative power and would in this way lose part of its credibility at the international level. So so although there was a main instance or first instance of rule of law concerns about the rule of law, the respect for the rule of law and democratic standards within single and individual member states in the Austrian crisis already in 2000, crisis that was dealt also thinking about the forthcoming Eastern enlargement and the accession of a series of post-communist countries to the EU, which could were currently under a process, the application of the so-called Copenhagen criteria, which aim to support the democratic transition of these countries. The emergence of rule of law concerns started in 2010 with when the Fidesz government came to power in Hungary, and the action of the European Union was considered by scholars and also by some public opinions or civil society organizations as particularly slow and unresponsive to the emergence and the rapid the unfolding of the events, which led to the series of reforms, for example, in Hungary that I listed before. some of the main explanation provided by scholars is the authoritarian equilibrium model provided by Kelemen, which emphasizes the political and partisan effects conditions that reduce the effectiveness of the EU to tackle rule of law crisis, in particular the presence of the European political groups which shield backsliding governments that belong to the same partisan partisan faction, and it was the case, for example, was pointed out, for example, in the case of the EPP for Fidesz until 2019, when Fidesz was thrown out of the party, was not considered anymore part of the EPP, and was officially rejected. So the rule of law. Focusing Kelemen's model focuses a lot on the partisan aspect of the crisis, but of course although a lot of accounts stress the slow reaction of the EU, there was over the time there was a long a lot of transformations, and the EU rule of law toolbox started to grow. The amount of instruments and tools started to were either complemented by the creation of new instruments, or were transformed to address the evolution of the crisis. This is all the innovations introduced by the EU are essentially aimed to overcome the difficult applicability of Article 70U, which is the legal instrument designed by the treaty to address the rule of law, potential rule of law crisis. It was since the beginning. The problem is that since the beginning, it was framed as a nuclear option and a remedy of last resort, because of its, of course, because of its strong consequences, the strong consequences of its sanctions, which lead to the loss of any EU benefits, the benefits provided by EU membership. And also because of its difficult applicability due to the high threshold for the activation of sanction. But it was also contested as a will of action. And indeed, the first preventative measure, the first preventative instruments of Article 7 procedure was applied in 2018 against Hungary. Other rule, therefore, the EU pointed to other provisions contained in its legislative structure, the infringement procedures, for example, which were also characterized as being too narrow and too easy to be circumvented, for example, as happened, for example, in the case of Hungary and Poland itself, and in the case, for example, of the retirement age for the judges. And the main problem was that the infringement procedures are considered as not able to address the real causes and provide broader solutions to the problem, to the illiberal transformations. Along the time, the EU resorted to a series of soft law tools, which were perceived as having a lower threshold. Like, for example, the rule of law framework and dialogue introduced in 2014, or the EU justice scoreboard system, or the EU rule of law report introduced in 2020. And And increasingly, they resorted to economic and fiscal measures, since, for example, through adopting several instruments and transforming the existing economic structure of the EU, the existing economic measures at the EU level, for example, the European semester, which was repurposed, particularly after in the post-pandemic, in the context of the post-pandemic recovery strategy, was repurposed to ensure respect of rule of law standards because of its dialogical nature and its character of a soft law tool. But through the country-specific recommendations, it provided a channel to introduce targeted reform suggestions. Also switching from a broader, a narrow focus on the economic, compliance with economic measures, as it was the case during the Eurozone crisis, to an increased emphasis on respect for democratic principles and rule of law. And in particular, with the introduction of budgetary conditionality instruments, a series of budgetary conditionality instruments in the multi-annual financial framework from 2021-2027, the most significant regulation, the most relevant regulation introduced by the EU to address the to address the rule of law crisis, which marked also a shift in the procedure adopted at the EU level, leading scholars to question whether there is any renewed proactivity by the EU institutions to address the problem, is the Regulation 2020-2092, which links the respect of rule of law standards to the principle of sound financial management of the EU budgets. And the regulation was negotiated, was already present in 2016. Was already the idea of a regulation linking the disbursement of EU funds on the respect of standards of democratic standards and rule of law standards, was introduced already in 2016, especially by the European Parliament. But the idea did not actually translate into a regulation until 2020 in the context of the next post-pandemic recovery in the next generation EU, which also was indicated as a factor that favored the approval of the regulation and provided a positive opportunity to introduce it in the European Council of December 2020, overcoming the resistance of Hungary and Poland in particular, but also their member states. So then, without delving in detail in the contents of in the text of the final regulation, the most innovative points of the regulation are the presence of the definition of rule of law, precise definition of rule of law, conceived in relation with the values enlisted in enshrined in Article 2 of the Treaty on European Union, and the precise definition of cases and instances of breaches of the rule of law, and its strong connection to between breaches of the rule of law and the management of the Union, which derives from was accentuated during the process of negotiation of the regulation from the Commission's first draft and the suggestions of the European Parliament to the text that was actually approved. The regulation that was approved as a very narrow and precise focus on rule of law breaches that affect the management of the Union Fund, that have an impact on the management of Union funds. And this, on the one hand, this is had a positive effect on, has a positive effect on the likelihood of the applicability of the application of these conditionality instruments, of these and other conditionality instruments that were introduced in the multi-annual financial framework. But as I was saying, on the one hand, on the one hand, it is positive because drawing on the literature of conditionality, the most precise and strict definition of conditionality on the requirements and requirements produced by the conditionality normatives and requested to the state can prompt a more accurate application, can increase the likelihood of the actual application of the conditionality. Moreover, on the other hand, this is it can be problematic for the broader for a broader understanding of the rule of law backsliding and democratic backsliding, as we defined it as a very complex phenomena made of interconnected facts that do not limit to cannot be limited to their impact on the respect of financial on the management of financial resources. Moreover, and this narrow focus could also limit. Too far. Okay. This narrow focus can limit the potential of future application of future evolution in the rule of law toolbox to address and assess more effectively the other the crisis of democratic standards within member states, and also the budgetary, the idea of linking the disbursement of financial and economic funds to the EU can be is more pointed, more can prompt a stronger reaction compared to other to soft law rules, which rely essentially on voluntary compliance or peer pressure and recommendations. And it can also be it can be observed that it was a conditionality. The budgetary conditionality was applied in the case of Hungary, Poland, and actually had some effects. So a share of funds was retained by the EU from the allocation of the Next Generation EU, which impacted the perception of public opinion of the governments among public opinion, also because of the wide amount of new financial resources provided and the important opportunity the wide opportunity provided by the post-pandemic recovery strategy to foster reforms at the national level. Also, as a consequence, the other trend that can be observed and could provide further studies in the future is first of all the impact of the conditional of these new proactive stance of the European Union on its on the interinstitutional balances, the balance of and the future directions of individual EU institutions, and whether another problematic aspect that can be analyzed and can have possible consequences is the depoliticization, the tendency to depoliticize the rule of law issue, which on the one hand was proved successful, sparking less politicization of discouraging in a certain way the politicization of the EU measures within the national the public opinion of national of member states affected, and discouraging a rely around the flag effect and the instrumentalization of the measures by the backsliding government, as happens, for example, in the case of the migration crisis. But on the other hand, this is of course an open question, although also because the procedure, this policy change was very recent, started only in 2010. So there is scope for further innovations, of course, in the future. So on the other hand, the question is how is whether this depoliticization can actually be a response to phenomena of democratic backsliding unfolding in under the impulse of populist movements, which overemphasize the political dimension and have a strong tendency towards politicization. So of course, although it is an ongoing debate, an ongoing question, what's certain is that as the rule of law crisis in particular led to rethink about the political dimension of the EU and the interaction with the political and the technocratic dimension of EU institutions, as well as on the wider democratic deficit discourse, the democratic accountability of the institution itself, starting from a problem concerning the democratic level of the singular member states.
Thank you, dear Carla, and let's give the floor to Professor Cavallaro for last comment.
Thank you. So I'll go in English just so you can then answer to my question. So first of all, a general overview on the thesis. I think that the three parts, the three sections are very well balanced. I mean, I like the definition of populism and all the way in which it has been applied, and the same goes for the other two. The second one, in which you describe the several procedures, the infringement procedures, and all the others. This famous toolbox that the EU has can use just to stop some the rise of some undemocratic or illiberal turnout and illiberal movement from the member states. And the same goes, I mean, for the third section. I think that the results can be used both in political science, as my colleague was saying at the beginning in the introductions, but also in the more general field of EU studies. I have a question for you. I mean, more than one, which is, but I would like to put them all together. I think the thesis is a thesis on the centrality of the rule of law. You mentioned even at the beginning, in the introductions, you mentioned the Article 2 and the importance for the respect of human dignity, freedom, and democracy. And then you also cover all along the thesis also the fact that the concept of democracy even is not precise, is not explicitly pointed out, it's not described in the treaties of Rome. And then you mentioned the Bilderberg report as the first moment in which the EEC thought the Bilderberg report as a sort of antecedent of the Copenhagen criteria, we may say, because it was stated that democracy is a precondition. If you are not a democracy, you are not allowed to enter the EEC, because this is because the EEC has been created to just after the Second World War, as all we know, for peace, but also for granting and maintaining democracy. So this is this was at the beginning. Then my colleague was asking if the criteria of Copenhagen are still valid. I mean, if you can just elaborate more, a bit more on that. And then I have another, I mean, part of the questions, which is something that I see, we all see in the two cases, both in Poland and in Hungary. We see some political parties that are being elected, so they don't take the power. There is no coup d'état. They've been elected by their citizens, and then there is this kind of turn. They belong to the center-right areas. They at European level they were closer to the EPP parties, or they were closer to the European conservative parties, or we may say the right wing parties at European level, and then they turn out, they have this internal transformation, and they moved towards the defense of ethno-populistic stance, as you underline in your work. So this is not only a problem for these countries. I mean, not only for the Eastern European countries for which the Copenhagen criteria has been formulated, but this is something that is also having an impact in the old Europe, in Germany. Let's stay on these days. The AfD is fundamental for maintaining, for forming majority, and has increased his role in Germany very strongly in the latest year. There are other parties. We have seen Le Pen in France, that was in the stance for becoming president of the French Republic. So these parties have an impact on public opinion. They are followed by public opinion, and this is one of the preoccupations, worries that we have at European level. How to make these parties and the member states to respect the rule of law. So they used, one of the features is the use of economic conditionality, as you have said. But economic conditionality, just try to, I know that you would like to go on and studying and going on this and this kind of study, can be used also by the member states and by these political parties. This is something that emerged in some part of the thesis, but is not. I mean, it's not the principal focus of your work, but can be used by the center right or right, radical right, call it as you want, or political parties to go against, I mean, to increase their consensus, to increase their as I said, their consensus, to increase their centrality, to raise more votes among the population, and also to increase Euroscepticism, because what they say is that we have been given money, especially nowadays with the next generation EU, only if we behave in the way in which the Union is asking. And this is considered to be also like an extra power of the EU, which is entering the nation state decision power, which we are not in a federal union, and there are some rules that in which the EU should remain outside. Of course, there are migrations issues that are developed altogether, fiscal issues, but there are some aspects like foreign policy, for example, or many others in which the nation state can decide following the so-called confederal or intergovernmental model. So what do you think about the economic conditionality? Do you think that the member states can use it? The member states, and more than the member states, is the right-wing parties that are governing some European European Union member states, can use at their advantages all this, and how this is connected to the increase of populism and Euroscepticism? This is my question. And if you think that this is a problem related only to Central Eastern Europe, which is the way in which sometimes, as we have seen, the mechanism of check and balance has been pushed a lot by the government, or do you think that is a problem that can have an impact also in countries such as Germany, France, Italy, I mean, the old, the founding members of the EU?
So-
Thank you.
Okay, so to start in order, about the Copenhagen criteria and the validity of Copenhagen criteria. Of course, I didn't mention in detail in my in the previous presentation, but of course, the democratic the statement of principles of democracy, rule of law, was not clearly presented as an essential requirement for the access to get access to the European community at the beginning. For example, in the Treaty of Rome, there is no mention about the democratic nature of the government. And this was mainly because the original member states, the founding member states, shared a similar political culture, let's say, and a similar institutional structure. So it was sort of assumed. Of course, the problem started to be introduced when the EU, the core member states, were confronted to the members at their borders, let's say. So first of all, the southern European member states, which at the time were governed by dictatorships, and this is the reason why, for example, the Birkelbach report was written, affirming clarifying the economic and also institutional conditions, institutional requirements to be part of the community. And the problem emerged again when when the EU was extended and towards the former communist countries. And of course, this criteria had a strong importance, both for the EU and for the countries themselves, since the European Union was very active at the time of in post-communist, after the fall, after 1989. It was very active in supporting the democratic transition of Central and Eastern European countries, but also focusing, for example, on the judiciary, on the independence of the judiciary, and the respect of principle and separation of law, following a more legalistic, let's say, ideal of democracy. And this is also this probably has some impact on and is some of the vulnerability factors that affect that encouraged let's say provoked, contributed to the emergence of democratic backsliding in Central and Eastern Europe, and making these countries more prone to vulnerability to rule of law deterioration, let's say, in violations. But of course, the phenomenon of populism and contestation of the liberal democratic norms and the liberal narrative in general is not confined to, is not limited to the Central and Eastern Europe area. It's a Western phenomenon in general, affecting Western liberal democracies, and also, as you also mentioned, the founding member states. like France or Germany in the same, or Italy itself. But the populist parties, of course, have different characteristics depending on the region where they emerge, and they adopt different claims. For example, some of them are specific to the Central and Eastern European region. For example, not all the parties, not all populist parties in Central and Eastern Europe share to the same extent the importance, the emphasis, the stress on the general will of the people, like it happens, for example, in Western populist parties, which provided a model to theorize, for example, to theorize the basic characteristics of populism. And concerning the budgetary conditionality and their impact on the strengthening of populist movements, it is a phenomenon that was actually observed, and I agree with you. It's a problem. It's a possible consequence of both negative consequences of budgetary conditionality and economic instruments in general when they are employed to convey reforms, the structural reforms affecting the democratic level of the state. A positive factor of the current conditionality regime defined by the regulation that I analyzed, the conditionality instruments attached to the current budgetary framework is that they are careful to respect, for example, to guarantee that the funds that the project, the recipients of the projects funded with EU money, EU resources are not affected. And so, for example, they're trying to target these conditionalities are intended to target more specifically the government, and I think this is a positive counterbalancing measure to avoid the problem of what was called the rely around the flag effects and the instrumentalization of economic conditionalities. Of course, is also a side of the problem. For example, some recent accounts suggested to introduce also a positive, a sort of positive conditionality aimed to not only sanction by rule of law violations, but giving supporting with money, with EU funds, for example, civic NGOs or civic society movements, or opposition parties, for example, opposing the backsliding governments. So the problem is always the option for a more technocratic or legalistic approach to democracy, or a more substantive approach to democracy and rule of law, which is the art of the debate, and depends also on the stance adopted by individual institutions, EU institutions, for example.
Thank you.
In order to conclude, I would like to relaunch the question that I was raising at the beginning: what's next from this research? And in particular, considering that you have reviewed extensively the literature on populism, and considering that there are, you were mentioning Mood, who talks about a sort of populist zeitgeist, and considering that there are so many studies and researches that are demonstrating a sort of linkage between liberal democracies and rising populism, I would like to know from you, which is the exit strategy? Do you see an exit strategy? Because on the one hand, we have this global phenomenon of rising populism, And on the other hand, liberal democracies are suffering. Then can you envisage an exit strategy to defend democracy?
Of course, it's a complicated question, of course, since also as I also try to demonstrate that there are from the literature both populism and also some features of liberal some evolutions and developments of liberal democratic model are problematic and present some problematic factors. And I in the debates between concerning the relation between populism and liberal democracy, I would personally stand on the side of the debate that emphasizes the problematic nature of populism, so more populism as a threat than as a corrective. But of course, some laws of the liberal democratic model and some more, let's say, problematic aspect of the liberal democratic model and the evolution more attributable to the evolution of political parties or party systems in Europe and in Western democracies are evidence, of course, from evils of disaffection towards democracy or laws are now in Western democracies and beyond, of course. So I would think that economic conditionalities can be and rely on economic measures at the EU level, for example, to support the compliance with democratic standards. Could be a positive action, but I would not consider it the only possible strategy. Probably all the approaches, all the different approaches adopted by the EU in these EU toolbox, rule of law toolbox are combined together are more effective than focusing only on one side of respects of enforcement of rule of law. But on the other hand, there are also, of course, it depends on different factors, from the capacity of finding creative solutions by the EU itself, and also on the transformation of political landscape and political debates within the member state itself, and for example, the formation of a collective consciousness and collective public opinion at the EU level. Some more recent studies attribute this change and this more proactive attitude of the EU towards rule of law backsliding to an increase in the salience, for example, in the salience of rule of law concerns and rule of law backsliding at the EU level, which this phenomena started to become more, started to regain the center of the debate and forced also public opinions to pressure in a certain way their representatives at the EU level to intervene more actively, more decisively at the EU level to address the concern.
Grazie Maria Carla, io penso che può bastare così.
Thank you.
Grazie, vi chiediamo brevissimamente qualche minuto di attesa, grazie. Bene, ben trovati. Procediamo dunque alla chiusura della nostra seduta con la proclamazione. Dottoressa Maria Carla Merlo, la commissione composta dalla professoressa Panebianco, dalla professoressa Cavallaro e da me Adriana Di Stefano, ha approvato all'unanimità il suo esame di diploma e le conferisce pertanto la licenza di secondo livello nella classe delle scienze umanistiche e sociali della Scuola Superiore di Catania con voti di 70 settantesimi e lode. Congratulazioni vivissime anche da parte del presidente, il professor Malfitana, del professor Angilella, che non è qui ma ha raccomandato di rivolgerle i suoi più cari saluti, e di tutto lo staff della scuola e della comunità della scuola tutta, che è in parte presente. Applauso. Firma. Allora lei oggi diventa una alumna e le auguriamo ogni bene di restituire alla scuola quello che dalla scuola ha ricevuto, di mantenere un contatto sempre qui. Villa San Saverio sarà sempre casa sua in qualche modo, dai sorrisi che vedo in aula cogliamo tutti l'affetto che c'è intorno, che c'è stato e che ci sarà sempre intorno a Maria Carla per la sua simpatia, dolcezza, per il tratto distinto che sempre l'ha accompagnata in questi anni. Quindi ad Maiora.
Tanti auguri.
Grazie in particolare alla nostra controrelatrice che è stata con noi, e l'augurio, come è tradizione alla scuola, è di riaverla presto qui per un colloquio, per un seminario di ricerca. Sarà la benvenuta, e per me particolarmente, che non la conoscevo personalmente, è stato un piacere, insomma, averla qui e poterla incontrare. Auguri!
Ti lancio il caffè.